What about other leadership patterns? Obviously, the intellectual, fix-it, bulldozer, and bureaucratic leadership styles are stereotyped and one-dimensional. In reality, leadership style is usually a rich and varied combination of reflection, influence, action, and structure. We don't have enough time to discuss all of their variations. However, we can examine a few more patterns to develop a confidence in using the model. The reflection influence pattern. Suppose leaders have a very high score on the reflection scale, a high score on the influence scale, and relatively low scores on the action and structure scales. How are such leaders likely to behave? We would probably see leaders who are idea people with a strong desire to validate their ideas through others. Such leaders might interact with team members primarily around ideas, invite them to share their views, strongly express their own views, and actively sell ideas. To the extent that ideas themselves can excite people, such leaders might have a highly motivated and committed team. If this leadership style has a limitation, it might be a slight tendency towards anarchy. There is little emphasis on clear definitions of roles and responsibilities, little use of structured methods, and relatively little direct action. The overall effectiveness of this particular leadership style would depend heavily on the needs of the enterprise and the challenge it faces. Many people consider Walt Disney to have had this reflection influence leadership pattern. He was clearly the conceptual leader of the enterprise, but he engaged people at all levels in extending the concepts and applying the strategy. The influence action pattern. Consider leaders who have a high score on influence and a high score on action and fairly low scores on reflection and structure. How may these people behave? We would probably see hands-on leaders who use personal influence to accomplish goals. They would engage people on a personal basis, emphasizing commitment to performance and focusing their attention on priorities. They might set high expectations for team members and would probably judge them by the results. In some cases, the leaders might be very directive, insisting that certain things be done in certain ways. In other cases, leaders might be willing to allow people to decide for themselves exactly how to do things, provided they achieve the objectives. If the team operates well with little need for the leader to act as a visionary or conceptual architect, such a leader might be very effective. On the other hand, in a situation requiring careful thinking and planning, such a leader could be less effective. United States President Lyndon Johnson was often described as displaying this influence action pattern. He worked by building and capitalizing on personal relationships with other political leaders and was quite comfortable in applying intense pressure to get them to carry out the actions he wanted. The reflection action pattern. Imagine leaders who score high on reflection, high on action, and rather low on influence and structure. How would they be likely to act? These people create the dream and then put people to work to achieve it. People like Thomas Edison and Howard Hughes showed this pattern. They were both highly talented, goal-focused, and articulate. They knew what they wanted to accomplish and what had to be done. As leaders, each of them was willing to share ideas and accept influence from team members to a limited degree. Both were motivated by their own conceptual creations and were focused on the actions required to achieve them. The leader match principle. All the examples so far have one thing in common. They do not account for differences in the situations the leaders must face. Clearly, a person with a very distinctive leadership style might be very effective in one situation and completely ineffective in a different situation. To better understand the whole picture of leader effectiveness, we have to bring together the elements of the enterprise, the team, and the leader. This is the leader match principle. How can we evaluate the degree of match between the leader and the needs of the enterprise? How can we predict or at least identify intelligently any adjustments the leader will need to make if he or she is to succeed in a particular situation? We must define the kind of leadership needed by the enterprise and compare that to the kind of leadership the individual leader is providing. The difference or gap identifies where the leader may need to adapt his or her personal leadership style. The smaller the gap, the more likely the leader is to succeed by taking the enterprise where it needs to go without changing his or her style. The larger the gap, the more likely he or she will fail if changes aren't made. Today, you will learn to make two kinds of assessment. One is the assessment of your own typical leadership style based on your experience up to this time. The other is your assessment of the leadership needs of the enterprise for which you have served or for which you are now serving as leader. These two assessments and your judgment about the gap between them, if any, will enable you to approach the leadership challenge. It would help you to identify your needs for growth and development and become the kind of leader the enterprise needs. At this point, your workbook will provide you with the two exercises to assess your style and patterns and the needs of your organization. We'll discuss all this further on June 9th.